We are just seconds away from the opening bell on Wall Street. You can see they're all smiling down there. Why? Futures have been up, way up, after a pretty big day yesterday, too. Investors thrilled that President Trump signaled a bit of a retreat on his trade war with China. Also thrilled that he appeared to be backing off threats to try and fire the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. Again, we are standing by to hear from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to hear what he has to say to global economic leaders. He, too, signaled a bit of a turn on China, telling well-heeled investors he expects the U.S. battle with China to de-escalate. All right, as the market opens, let's bring in CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich to cover what I think is at least a little bit of a happier moment than we've seen over the last few weeks.
Absolutely. And investors and traders really only care about two things right now: the trade war and Jerome Powell. And they heard encouraging news from the president and the Treasury Secretary on both of those fronts. You can see the opening bell right now on Wall Street. Futures have been up all morning and they continue to stay there. This is really extending the rally from yesterday as investors really wanted to hear some sort of confidence about this trade war, a forward-looking direction that was positive. And they heard that from the president last night, who said that essentially the rates at which the tariffs are between China and the United States, they're not going to stay there. They're not going to drop to zero, but they're not going to stay at that really outrageous 145%. And then you also heard the president saying that he has no intention of firing the head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. Those two issues had investors very, very nervous. Now they're sort of breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief. Obviously, those two things are not set in stone just yet, but encouraging news, and that is boosting markets here this morning.
Yeah, again, I mean, saying that the tariffs are going to come down is kind of a retreat from where the tariffs are, and that's how investors are seeing it this morning. Clearly, they're thrilled on this. Now, one company, at least over the last 24 hours, not so thrilled, and that's Tesla. You know, Tesla profits, went way down.
Yeah. So net profits were down 71% from the year before. I mean, that is a dramatic drop. And obviously, Elon Musk has been spending a lot of time at the White House, at Doge, not as much time at his company. I was looking pre-market, and I saw Tesla's stock was up more than 7% because investors were encouraged by what he said in the earnings call. Take a listen to what he said.
So I think I'll continue to spend, a day or two per week on government matters for as long as the president would like me to do so, and as long as it is useful. But starting next month, I'll be allocating far more of my time to Tesla, and now that the major work of establishing the Department of Government Efficiency is done.
So you heard Elon Musk there. He really had no choice. He had to step back into his role more full-time at Tesla because stock price really dropped by 50% from its high. You can see Tesla there. Look at that. Yeah, investors clearly encouraged by him returning more in a full-time capacity to the company. We heard from an analyst on Wall Street, Dan Ives, who we hear from often specifically on Tesla, and he said that this was the time to close one dark chapter and open a brighter one for the Tesla story, with autonomous and robotics front and center. And he goes on to really say that Musk is Tesla and Tesla is Musk, and this is one of the most important technology period for Tesla. So essentially saying that Musk really had to return to this role in order to move the company forward, but also to make investors and traders on Wall Street feel more confident about where that company is going.
And time was up for him in the government too. His role inside the government had an expiration date as well, but Tesla clearly needs him back. That's what investors think. Vanessa Yurkevich, thank you very much. Kate?
This morning, we are standing by to hear what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will say today, because he said a lot already yesterday. He'll soon be speaking to global economic leaders, and just yesterday he told investors in a closed-door speech that the U.S.'s trade war with China was, quote-unquote, unsustainable, and that he expects the battle there to de-escalate soon. So we will see how the markets feel about that. We're 30 minutes away from opening bell. Futures have been pointing higher. I did it again, going the wrong way. Futures have been pointing higher all throughout the morning. Investors breathing a sigh of relief, as it's not just Bessent. You're also hearing it from President Trump, him hinting at a potential U-turn on his tariffs against China, saying Essentially, he's going to play nice with China now. That shift getting a lot of notice, a lot of places, including on Chinese social media this morning, with the hashtag Trump chickened out trending with millions of views. CNN's Zain Asher here with me now. Okay, so how significant? Whiplash for sure, and I can't promise what tomorrow will look like, of course, but how significant is this shift, specifically on when it comes to China, from Trump and Bessent?
It is huge. What we got yesterday was a slew of positive comments from both Bessent and Donald Trump. Bessent effectively saying what we already knew, Kate, that this trade war with China was basically unsustainable.
Right.
And that
he stated reality.
Stated reality, exactly. And when you're dealing with 145% tariffs, those are not tariffs. That's effectively an embargo at that level. What I thought was really interesting is that after that, we did not see the White House immediately come out and walk it back. The White House, not only do they let it sit, but Donald Trump obviously coming out several hours later and reiterating effectively what the Treasury Secretary said, essentially saying that those tariff levels are going to have to come down substantially. Let's play what the president had to say.
I'm not going to say, oh, I'm going to play hardball with China. I'm going to play hardball with you, President Xi. No. We're going to be very nice. They're going to be very nice. And we'll see what happens. But ultimately, they have to make a deal because otherwise they're not going to be able to deal in the United States.
So Donald Trump also saying, we heard him there saying that he's going to play nice. It's not going to be hardball anymore.
Except he had been saying that for weeks now.
He had been saying that for weeks. And then in terms of the tariffs, they're not going to be zero, right? But they are going to come down effectively. What we're learning is that when it comes to pressure from markets, Donald Trump doesn't usually cave to pressure from people. But when it comes to pressure from markets, that is a different story. Panic in equities, panic in the bond market, that is effectively Donald Trump's kryptonite. Another thing that I thought was also interesting, if you've noticed, Kay, we haven't really heard much from Lutnick or Navarro in a while. And
that's a good point.
And not from my perspective, but at least from the market's perspective, the less we hear from those two, the better. I think that what happens next and what markets are really going to want to see is when we go from sort of talking about a trade deal with China to actively negotiating and eventually getting a trade deal on the books with China.
And speaking of how he is speaking of things, he has now also completely trying to de-escalate his fight with, well, it wasn't with the Fed chairman, his fight at the Fed chairman.
His fight at the Fed chairman. So Donald Trump is essentially saying, listen, I have no intention of firing Fed Chair Jerome Powell, despite what we saw last week. Again, one of the issues for Donald Trump here was, of course, we talked about the legal issues.
Right.
But aside from that, again, if he even tried to go anywhere close to trying to fire... Utterance, the mere sort of thought of it, trying to fire Jerome Powell, we would have seen even more panic in equities, in treasuries, and of course, the value of the US dollar, as I talked about yesterday, would really plummet more than it already has.
So we have talk that is making people happy, but then it is, when does it become actual action and negotiation?